Good morning. I'll call to order the regular meeting of our Zoning and Planning Committee. Today is June 23rd, 2016. I'm Lisa Bender. I chair the committee. We now have a quorum with Council Members Goodman, Reich, and Council President Johnson. Councilmember Andrew Johnson is absent, and we expect Councilmember Warsami to join us later. We have 9 items on our agenda today. I'm going to pull item number 2 from consent so that we can hear that item along with the public hearing for a certificate of appropriateness. So this is a property at 4401 Lindale Avenue North. And we will be listening to a staff presentation about the designation before then taking up item number 1. The other items on consent, I'll move into those. Item number 3 is a rezoning for 1220 South 1st Street and 121 12th Avenue South, rezoning to C3A and removing the ILOD district to allow for a planned unit development with 374 dwelling units. Item number 4 is a rezoning at 710 West Broadway from OR2 to C3S to allow for a new retail store there. Item number 5 is referring to staff the subject matter of an ordinance updating our zoning code definition of half stories. This is to remove an incentive to build 3.5 stories rather than either 3 or 4 story buildings. And item number 6 is referring to staff the subject matter of an ordinance amending our zoning code related to yard and setback requirements in non-residential zoning districts. This is to look at the spacing that we're requiring between commercial buildings on commercial corridors. So I will move items 3 through 6 on consent. Does anyone have any discussion? Seeing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That carries. I will note that we do have 3 items for discussion after the hearing. There's a landmark designation, a small area plan, and then an update on our comprehensive plan. So with that, we'll return back to item number 2, which is the local historic designation for the Smith Lumber Historic District.
Bender and council members. All the things I'm talking about, I can talk about in more detail if you have questions, but I'm assuming you want the presentation to be fairly brief. The site is located 44th and North Lindale, and it's on the east and west sides of Lindale Avenue North. The properties on the east side, 4400 through 4430, are what we call the C.A. Smith and Compo Board, formerly the C.A. Smith and Compo Board buildings. And on the west side, in the designation study, it's called the Marine Johnson site, the former Marine Johnson machine shop. This map is helpful. It's at the end of your staff report in the packet, but before the designation study, and it shows all the buildings on the site and which ones are contributing and non-contributing. And I highlighted in yellow the ones that are non-contributing. So on the east side with C.A. Smith, there's a couple of sheds and a billboard, and on the west side there is, in addition to the office building, there's a garage building, number 5, which has already been approved for demolition at the HPC, and in addition on the north side that are considered non-contributing. And just looking at the aerial photograph going through the site, this is the C.A. Smith office building. It's referred to in the designation studies that this is the C.A. Smith or Compo Board factory building. On the west side of Lindale, on the Marine Johnson campus, this is what's called the office building, and this is what's called the factory building. As you can see, there's several additions. And then running through the site, a contributing element is a rail corridor, former Sioux Line rail corridor. Previously, our preservation plan in 1990 indicated that C.A. Smith was important in the business and industry context of the city. We also have a North Minneapolis context study that was done in 1998 that talked quite a bit about the importance of sawmills for the establishment of this neighborhood and industry for the establishment of this neighborhood. In 2011, we did a historic resource inventory and said both of these sites on the east and west side should be considered for designation. And in 2013, we did an inventory of the city, the Historic Resources Capstone, which also recommended properties on both sides of the street as possible landmarks under the category of 20th century manufacturing. And then in 2013, we had a request to demolish some of the buildings or all of the buildings on the west side of the street, and we wrote a historic review letter indicating that they were historic resources. So there's been a long history in planning documents of these properties being historic resources for the city. Jumping right to the staff report and the criteria, we found that it was significant under criteria. Both sides of the site were significant under criteria 1, 2, and 3. Criteria 1 is associated with significant events. that exemplify broad patterns of cultural, political, economic, or social history. And C.A. Smith, the east side of the street, was a significant lumber yard and a sawmill in between 1900 and 1910. See, it was the largest sawmill in Minneapolis, and they generated national attention in eliminating waste and maximizing raw material. In the 1890s, they employed 800 men and sawed 750,000 board feet of lumber a day. What they were really innovative for is they used a lot of waste wood to make things that were called shooks. They were boxes, wood boxes, before we had plastic and so forth. And in 1892, they got a patent for compo board, which was a sort of an early version of what we would call drywall now. The mill closed in 1912, but the compo board in the factory building stayed at the site till 1932. Two employees of C.A. Smith, Arnold Marine and Charles Johnson, worked for C.A. Smith and filed patents on behalf of C.A. Smith for horizontal reband saws that were used for making the shooks. And in 1905, they went across the street to start in 1905 they started Marine Johnson, and in 1916 they moved across the street as a fully independent company where they constructed the machine shop. 1917 the office building followed. And in the 30s and 40s they filed several patents for woodworking and machinery, and that's all in the designation study. They are important for their association with C.A. Smith and the lumber industry, but they're also important for the post-lumber industry, and they're important on their own. They were a leader in the field of machinery design and manufacturing, particularly in developing machinery to minimize waste generated by the local lumber industry. They pioneered new methods of manufacturing for the lumber industry. They continued to innovate and diversify as the lumber industry came to a close. They were forward-thinking and filed several patents. And they were the only company in Minneapolis solely focused on the production of sawmill machinery. In addition, they were at the site for over 100 years. We also said that it's significant for criteria number 2 for association with Charles Smith, Arnold Marine, or C.A. Smith, Arnold Marine, and Charles Johnson. And we also said that it was significant for the distinctive elements of city or neighborhood identity. And just reading from the context study, the lumber industry of the 19th century to Marine Johnson Machine Company innovations in saw technology during the mid-20th century industrial development has played a significant and defining role in Camden neighborhood's identity. The North Minneapolis context study identified C.A. Smith Lumber Company and Compo Board and other industrial sites in Camden as significant economic forces encouraging the development of North Minneapolis. And why they helped develop North Minneapolis was that they provided the jobs for the immigrants that came there, and they encouraged developers to subdivide the area to create the housing that created the neighborhood. As to the elements of integrity, we found that both sides of the street retained integrity of location, design, materials, workmanship, feeling, association, but it has lost some of its integrity of setting because, as you can see, the lumber mill at one time went down to the river, but now the interstate has gone through there, so that is gone. The Planning Commission reviewed this and found it in conformance with the comp plan. SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, reviewed it and said it was a candidate for local designation. We have letters of support from Lynn Bohannon and Weber Camden neighborhood in the packet. You also have letters from the property owners on both sides expressing their opinions about the designation. So I can answer questions about all that, but I thought before you went on to the next item, I had gone out to the site and taken pictures, and it's probably helpful to just see some of these pictures going around the site. So if you're standing on Lyndale Avenue looking east towards the C.A. Smith site, that's the office building, the one that says Machine Specialties, and this is the factory building. That's a close-up of the C.A. Smith office building. From the north, looking south at it. Looking east through the C.A. Smith site along the rail corridor, these two buildings would be non-contributing buildings. And that's looking at the Compo Board factory building from the north. I didn't go back into the site to take pictures at the rear of the site. Now going to the west side of Lyndale, the Marine Johnson site. This is the Marine Johnson office building, so you can see the original office building. This on the north side is a 1953 addition. Looking along the south side of that exact same office building, down 44th, you can see an addition on the back of the office building. Moving back to Lyndale, looking west at the site, this is the office building again with the addition that I talked about. This is the garage building, and in between is the railroad corridor. The garage building was the one that was non-contributing and that the HPC said could be torn down. Just more pictures of that in the rail corridor. You can see some of the interior campus from Lindale through the rail corridor. If we go to the north of the site, so here along 45th, there's a McDonald's at the corner looking into the yard. This is the yard with a non-contributed addition towards the north side of the site. From Aldridge and 45th looking southeasterly at the site, that's a 1969 addition that's also non-contributing. Looking down Aldridge to the east, so you can see there's a long street wall there, although this part of the building is non-contributing. And then moving to, if one is standing right here at 44th and Aldridge, you can see the original factory building. Another view of the factory building. And here's the rail corridor as it would go towards the creek. Just really quickly, you can see in 1912, you had the lumber yards going down to the river and lumber storage on the west side where Marine Johnson is. But by 1937, you had the Marine Johnson factory and the C.A. Smith site much smaller. By 1956, you see more additions. 1967, more additions to Marine Johnson. And then finally, today, 2016, you see the interstate is through and the current condition. So I know I went through that really quick. If there's questions you have, I'd be happy to answer any of them.
Thank you, Mr. Bull. Are there any questions for staff? There are none. Council President?
Madam Chair, I would like to deny the appeal and I'm sorry, excuse me. We're approving, I want to move to approve the C.A. Smith Lumber Historic District designation for the properties at 4401 Lindale, 4400, 4410, 4420, and 4430 Lindale.
Perfect. So Council President has moved the designation of this area following the staff presentation. Is there any discussion? Council Member Goodman.
I just want to note we have a public hearing. So where are we at in that process? Did you say we were going to take up item 2 first and then?
That's correct.
Got it.
We have to designate the district before we
First.
can open the public
Got
hearing
it.
for the
Thank you.
certificate of appropriateness. It's a little unusual to have them both at the same meeting. Yeah. Thanks for the question. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in approval of designation of the district, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. So that brings us to item number 1, which is the certificate of appropriateness appeal.
All right. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Bender, council members. Item number 1 is an appeal of 2 certificate of appropriateness applications from the May 17th HPC meeting. Both of the appeals are involved at the project at 4401 Lindale Avenue North, one of the properties part of the designation study that you just approved. Today you'll be considering an appeal submitted by Kathy Osborne with 4401 Lindale Avenue North LLC regarding the Preservation Commission's actions to deny a certificate of appropriateness to allow the demolition of the Marine Johnson office building and the 32-foot by 48-foot brick pattern vault addition constructed on the northeast end of the Marine Johnson factory building. And you're also hearing an appeal based on for a certificate of appropriateness to deny in addition to the Marine Johnson factory building. Looking at that factory, looking at the Marine Johnson site, this is the property on the west side of Lindale Avenue North, part of the C.A. Smith Lumber Historic District. The property, the office building that is in question is this building that's located on the corner of Lindale Avenue North and 44th Avenue North. And the brick pattern vault is this portion of the building that is at the northeast end of what was the original portion of the factory building, which I'll go into a little bit more history on. As part of the application at HPC, staff did recommend approval of, and the HPC did support the demolition of a garage that is located on the property. That was a non-contributing building, it was used as a garage and not attributed to the actual production that took place at the site. So the garage is not part of the appeal. So the Maureen Johnson Machine Company was started by two employees of the C.A. Smith Lumber Company, Arno Maureen and Charles Johnson, in 1905. They invented the first horizontal band resaw while employed at the C.A. Smith Lumber Company. The Maureen Johnson Company's operations were originally housed near the river within the larger C.A. Smith site. However, within approximately 2 years of being in business, Maureen Johnson was ready to expand their production facilities. While the two businesses enjoyed a symbiotic relationship during Maureen Johnson's early years, by the 1910s, Minnesota's white pine stands were rapidly depleting, and C.A. Smith Lumber Company began closing down its Lindell Avenue plant. During this time, the Maureen Johnson Machine Company filed a series of patents for machine types that diversified their production. In 1916, Maureen Johnson Machine Company completed its break from C.A. Smith, branding itself as a fully independent company by constructing a new machine shop on the west side of Lindell Avenue North. The brick machine shop measured 40 feet by 245 feet and featured long windows along its length. In addition to raising Maureen Johnson's profile as a company, the shop was located directly alongside a Sioux Line rail siding, allowing for easy loading and distribution of the machines the company manufactured. So the original portion of the machine shop that was constructed was located in this area, and this is the Sioux Line rail siding that came across from the C.A. Smith located on the east side. So just to give you some indication of where the company started. In 1917, Maureen Johnson constructed an office building alongside their machine shop. Business during the 1910s and 20s was clearly successful. Maureen Johnson followed the initial construction of its machine shop and office building with a series of expansions to the machine shop, construction of a foundry, and construction of a pattern vault. Throughout the 20th century, Maureen Johnson marketed its productions at a national level. The late 1930s and 40s appear to have been a particularly dynamic time for the company. Significant additions to the factory were added in 1943 and 1946, suggesting an increase in production accompanied this diversification of product offerings. Additions continued at the site until 1969. Per the designation study, the site includes 2 contributing and 1 non-contributing building and a contributing site element, the Sioux Line rail siding. The office building is a single-story brick building. And the office building is a single-story brick building originally constructed in 1917, with a brick addition added to the north side in 1953. A newer concrete block addition extends across the west side of both of these buildings, which is a non-contributing element to the site. The building has a flat roof, a clay tile parapet is present at the original portion of the building, and the cornice featuring curbing with a string course below, and the water table stands proud of the upper portion of the walls. This is the brick pattern vault. This is that portion of the building that the applicants are wishing to demolish. This was built in 1920. It was one of those series of additions that was done to the factory building. The building, a brick pattern vault is, it was important to the production of the factory as it held the patterns for the saws that they were making in an upright position. So it had a purpose for the building and for the company. The applicant is proposing to demolish these buildings. Currently, they use the site as a contractor's yard and maintenance facility for a number of businesses that Atomic Recycling owns, including Pro Pellet, which is a manufacturer of kitty litter, where recycled wood is converted into pellets. The portion in yellow is the addition that they're proposing to the site. So they're proposing to demolish the buildings and construct an addition to enclose the truck loadout area for Pro Pellet, which is currently uncovered today. The applicant has indicated that the office building and the Maureen Johnson garage building need to be demolished in order to make room for truck maneuvering and additional truck parking on site. The applicant is proposing to construct a 5,100 square foot addition that measures 80 to 93 feet long by 59 feet wide. At that northeast end of the factory building. It would be 25 feet tall and would have a flat roof. The addition would be clad in cedar and would have clear-story windows on the east side of the addition. And this is what the addition is proposed to look like. This would be the end facing Lindale Avenue North. This is the south elevation facing 44th. And this is the north elevation that would face the interior of their site, if you want to say, or the north side of their building. The HPC denied both certificates of appropriateness. The C.A. Smith Lumber Historic District is significant for its association with late lumber and post-lumber industries in Minneapolis, for its association with C.A. Smith, Arno Marine, and Charles Johnson, and for its association with distinctive elements of the identity of the Camden neighborhood. The demolition of the office building in the brick pattern vault addition would not be compatible with the designation of the C.A. Smith Lumber Historic District, including the period and criteria of significance. Both buildings are essential elements in the district, which reveal the successful expansion of the Marine Johnson Machine Company. In addition, the demolition of the building would not ensure the continued integrity of the C.A. Smith Lumber Historic District, nor would it be consistent with the applicable recommendations of the Secretary of the Interior standards. These buildings were constructed during the period of significance and contribute to the integrity of the district. The applicant is not asserting that the demolition of these buildings is necessary to correct an unsafe or dangerous condition. However, the applicant contends that these buildings need to be demolished as there is no economic value in renovating them, and that in order to allow for adequate truck access to the proposed addition, that they need to be demolished. The applicant provided cost estimates for renovation for asbestos abatement, which are attached to the report. The applicant's information is based upon only one option of renting out the building to someone else. However, since they have several of their own businesses in the building, they could utilize the buildings themselves, and that option was not explored. Without an exploration for reuse of the existing structures for utilization by their own businesses rather than leasing to other businesses, it is impossible to conclude that there is no economic value or usefulness of these structures. If the property were to be placed on the National Register of Historic Places, a substantial rehabilitation of the buildings could be eligible for state and federal tax credits, which could provide up to a 40% tax credit for the project. The proposed addition would not be compatible with the designation of the C.A. Smith Lumber Historic District, nor would it ensure the continued integrity of the district. The proposed addition would not be compatible with the portion of the building that would remain on site, the contributing building. It would be taller and have significantly more bulk than the remaining building, making the addition clearly out of proportion with the remaining building. For those reasons, staff did recommend denial of both applications, and for those reasons, the HPC upheld staff recommendation.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff before the public hearing? Okay, there aren't. So then we will open the public hearing. How many people would like to speak on this item? Okay, so why don't we start with the applicant, and then we'll go from there. Please state your name and address for the record, and then if you haven't, please sign in with the clerk at the end there after you speak.
Hi, my name is Kathy Osborne. I represent 4401 Lindale Avenue North, LLC.
And I'm Mark Castor from Dorsey & Whitney, and I'm the counsel for the applicant. So today we'd like to ask you to approve our certificate of appropriateness. And let me give you a little bit of background before we get into some of the details. Kathy's putting up the site plan that you just saw from staff. So the property was purchased a couple of years ago by Kyle and Reed Lewis for expansion of their investment in North Minneapolis. They've been North Minneapolis businessmen for a very long time, and so their principal operations reflect a commitment not only to North Minneapolis, but also to sustainability. As you heard, part of their business there is the recycling of wood products into a kitty litter, and stewardship, which I think are important to the continued development of North Minneapolis. So the owners took a vacant and vandalized property and upgraded it for their use. In fact, just about a year and a half ago, the city approved the construction of a large air handling system so that they could facilitate their business. So they have 20 on-site full-time employees. They administer 80 off-site employees from this location. They have 30 professional drivers. They've got a proud union workforce of 110 employees, and they provide excellent wages of $22 to $35 an hour. Why was this property vacant in the first place? Well, I mean, we've listened to all the historic discussions regarding Maureen Johnson, but the fact of the matter is Maureen Johnson up and left and took their business to South Dakota. So you're really saying, well, we're going to designate this and put constraints on this property for an ownership here that didn't see fit to even stay in Minneapolis. My client's in Minneapolis. They want to stay in Minneapolis. They have a strong commitment to the city and to the north side of the city, both in terms of upgrading this facility and also in terms of employment, local employment that's significant to the area. I think as staff said, they operate 4 or 5 businesses out of there, including Propellant and Atomic and Broadway Resource Recovery. So, you know, they really have made an investment in this community, and the constraints that are being placed on them by this historic designation and by the denial of the certificate of appropriateness really causes their business significant hardship. So as you heard, the property is located on the southern side, the very south side edge of the Lynn Bohannon area of North Minneapolis. It is zoned for I-2. It's an industrial piece of property. The owners need to expand their business there, and to do that, they need to remove the constraints of that small office building, and they need the approval of the city to build that extension to the business for trucks and so forth. The owners are committed to community involvement. Kathy is part of the Lynn Bohannon neighborhood. She sits on committees, and they've also worked with the City of Minneapolis Police Force to enhance their partnership for the area. The owners requested a certificate of appropriateness during interim protection for several reasons. One, to remove those 2 small buildings because of the constraints to the property. You can see that it really fronts Lyndale Avenue, and without removal of those businesses, it really constrains their ability to pull their trucks in and out. As you heard staff say, we indicated and provided significant information in our submittals showing that it would cost over $1 million to renovate this property. So the cost for that renovation is really economically infeasible, not feasible. And that is really one of the key criteria for determining whether a certificate of appropriateness should be approved. The owners are requesting approval for construction of this warehouse addition. It's a $650,000 addition, and it's going to provide additional storage for their recycled materials. So turning my attention to the criteria that staff was alluding to or speaking to in regards to the certificate of appropriateness, there are 5 criteria. 1, is the alteration compatible with the designation of a historic district? You know, we've put materials into the city, and I'm not going to recite them chapter and verse here, but there was never any discussion about a historic district for this property. It was actually nominated as an individual landmark. We didn't know there was any information regarding the establishment of the C.A. Smith Historic District. You know, our property is on the west side of Lyndale. All of the lumber and sawmilling activities took place on the east side of Lyndale Avenue. And in fact, all of those old sawmills and lumber yards, they're gone. Why? Because of Highway 94 that came in there. So in terms of integrity, in terms of the significance to the history, what we're really talking about are 2 individuals, had some patents, made some bandsaws, recognize that, but there are other ways to recognize that rather than to encumber an entire property. So, you know, our view is that until they started to, you know, move their business to South Dakota, that these properties really didn't have significance in terms of the history relating to the sawmills across the street, and that integrity is gone. A couple of pictures might help illuminate this. Here is a picture immediately to the north of our property. It's a McDonald's restaurant of no historic significance, I don't think, but maybe others disagree. This is the property immediately to the south of our property. It's a transfer station, recycling transfer station. Here's the property itself as it's currently configured, our property. And as you can see, we've got truck storage and materials. In the back, you can see the city approved the construction of a large air handling system. And what we want to do is enclose that area. We think there are significant benefits to enclosing that area, which is why we've been asking for the certificate of appropriateness during this interim protection. Here's a map, another site plan showing how we envision the site going forward. So you've got the extension, you've got the removal of the two front buildings, and in place of the two front buildings, you'd have what we're calling a rain garden, or an area where we would have an opportunity for water to move off the property. So as I was going back to the 5 criteria, is the alteration compatible with the designation? We think it is. We're on the west side of Lindale, not the east side. We don't have any real aesthetic parts of this property. It's really a brick and mortar. It has been upgraded, changed, wrecked, demolished. Additions have been made to it via the city permit files over 30 times. And here's just a quick synopsis. It's in our materials, but it's a quick synopsis over the years of all of the changes, the wrecking permits, the alterations, the additions to the property, the most significant of which was in 1969, when an addition was made to the property of the same general size as what's being proposed today. So we're really doing nothing than what has been done at this property over the past 40 years. I think staff may have said that the site, folks have been at the site for over 100 years. I don't think that's correct. I mean, Maureen Johnson moved out, as I said, to South Dakota, but the last major development or change of the property occurred in 1969. It was large. I think it was size-wise, it was 62 feet by 120 feet by 18 feet, very similar to what we're proposing today, outside of any period of significance. The second criteria is, does the alteration ensure continued integrity? And as I said, when we're talking about integrity, we're not connected to the sawmills and lumber yards across Lindale. In fact, they're all gone, as I said, because of Highway 94. Second, integrity, we've got McDonald's next to us. We've got a recycled, recycling transfer station to the south of us. So we don't think that that really impacts the integrity of the area. In fact, when we canvassed all the neighbors, the businesses up and down Lindale Avenue, they support this project and in fact have submitted letters and the documents to the city in support of us. The third criteria is the alteration consistent with applicable design guidelines. Well, there aren't any design guidelines at present. In fact, it's an I-2 industrial piece of property. So it's unclear to me what kind of design guidelines are really envisioned here. I will say this, that the owners are committed to working with the city and city staff to make sure that what we construct there meets your needs and our needs. And we're not here to be adversarial on that, but it is an industrial piece of property. We're sensitive to the neighbors. We're involved with the neighborhood group. We're involved with the business community up and down Lindale Avenue. And I think we want to continue to have that kind of cooperative partnership, both with the city and with the community. Number 4 is the criteria or the alteration consistent with criteria under the National Secretary of State or Interior Standards for Treatment of Historic Properties. You heard staff say that this site could be eligible for historic designation. I don't think there's any way that that's possible. I mean, you've looked at this property, you've seen the pictures of it. It really is a concrete block building. That's what we have here. The historic designation relates to the owners, and we're prepared to recognize the owners if that's what the city wants. We could provide signage. We've proposed to put an old bandsaw up on the face of the building to indicate the historic district. We embrace that aspect of it. We just don't think there should be constraints on what we can do with this I-2 zone property. Number 5 is the alteration consistent with the spirit and intent of the ordinance and the comprehensive plan and the city's desires? And I think it is. We are enhancing North Minneapolis, both from a business perspective, from an employment perspective, from a tax-based perspective. We're taking an area and a piece of property that frankly was not utilized, was vandalized, and we put it into usefulness that I think really enhances that area of the city. So for all of those reasons, and the materials that we submitted should be included into the record here, we'd ask you to approve our certificates of appropriateness. As I said, we're prepared to work with the city to facilitate mutual objectives here. So, Kathy, any more?
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? I don't see any. Okay, let's continue along with the public hearing. Thank you so much for your presentation. If anyone else would like to speak, please come on up to the microphone.
Good morning. My name is Buzzy Bond, and I'm not an architect, and I'm not a lawyer, but I am a North Minneapolis resident, and I am a community historian. Lumber milling in Minneapolis, in particular in North Minneapolis, was as much a part of the city's history and our North Side history as the flour mills. Nobody at this point would even consider taking down what remnants are left of the flour mill, even though flour milling is long gone out of the city of Minneapolis. There's a reason there's a historic lumberman statue in Weber Park, nearby Weber Park, because it is such a significant part. As to the Maureen Johnson significance, I've heard people say who want to tear down buildings that, well, it was a saw that they invented. No, it was the first of its kind, horizontal resaw. It was so innovative that they ended up moving across the street to create this new company. Nobody would deny that I-94 cut through a part of that historic area. But if you are down by the river, especially when the river is low, there are still remnants of the lumber mills all along the riverbank. Now, we've been talking a lot in the recent years of redoing the northern half from downtown to the city limits of the riverfront. I think that this historic district and having these buildings be held in integrity could be a large part of the redevelopment of the north end of the river. And so I'm hoping that you will deny them being able to take down those historic buildings. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Would anyone else like to speak? Come on up, please.
Morning. My name is Linda Chappell. I'm a resident of the Lynn Bohanna neighborhood. I'm very familiar with the site. I've lived across the street from it for 27 years. The significance of the Maureen Johnson building to me is equally important as the C.A. Smith building. The money was borrowed to Maureen Johnson from C.A. Smith. The rail line, does anyone know the story of the donkey? A donkey took paperwork from one building to the other. These were men that helped each other, borrowed money to each other. They were connected in more ways than just moving across the street. Some of the big houses on Lyndale, 4026 Lyndale, those houses were owned by some of the compo board inventors. So some of the main houses that you see on Lyndale that are beautiful and magnificent, take a chance if you get to see them, open houses. You will never see woodwork inside of them again in your life. As to the world records, we had world records, not just national records. People from Sweden came over to see. First, the man from Sweden came here for the milling. But we were so efficient at Maureen Johnson and C.A. Smith that in the 1910s or 1920s, people from Sweden came over to see just how efficient Minneapolis was, Camden Place, that they could have no waste from a board. The other thing I would like to say is Hillcrest Development, which is instrumental in pretty much building all of Northeast Minneapolis, was interested in this property about 5 years ago. I'm not sure if it was red tape or hoops, but we could have had a fabulous start to a historic lumber district. After that, the Salvation Army tried to get in there, and I'm pretty sure that we know how that went. And at that time, the property went from a high value to almost no value. As to embracing, upgrading, and enhancing, I have to say that not even a bucket of paint has been put on the property. The trees are 2 years too late. They had stacking of containers for years that were over 25 feet high when 7 feet is the limit. There were loose tires with water in